Welcome to this explainer. Today we're stepping into the role of your strategic advisors, and we're going to diagnose a critical systemic issue that is just running rampant in the entrepreneurial world right now. We're talking about founder burnout. Now, think back to the day you started your business. You probably wanted freedom, right? Financial freedom, time freedom, the ability to control your own destiny. But for so many of us, that dream is kind of morphed into a trap. You built this amazing machine, and now you're stuck inside it, frantically pulling all the levers just to keep the whole shebang from falling apart. If you've ever felt completely drained by the very business you built to give you freedom, well, you are in exactly the right place. And don't worry, we aren't going to tell you to take a bubble bath or just take a weekend off. We're going to look at this through a totally different lens, the lens of structure. We are going to examine the very architecture of the long game. Let's dive in.
First things first, hustle is a season. Culturally, we absolutely love the grind. We celebrate the late nights, the early mornings, the brute force required to get a business off the ground. We wear our exhaustion like a badge of honor, like it's proof that we care more and work harder than anyone else. And listen, that initial personal effort, it's absolutely necessary to create momentum. It is the spark that ignites the engine. But here's the catch. It is a temporary phase. Relying purely on that grind, that sheer willpower, is not a permanent, scalable strategy. Think about it. A spark is meant to start a fire, not sustain it forever. If you want to be here 10 years from now, thriving and not just barely surviving, you literally cannot rely on your grind. You just can't force growth through sheer lack of sleep.
Because while hustle is a season, systems are a lifestyle. This is the massive paradigm shift we need to make today. Long-term survival, and more importantly, true freedom, require a structural lifestyle change. It's not about finding more energy, chugging more coffee, or reading yet another motivational quote to power through an endless to-do list. The long game is won by the person with the best systems, not the person with the most energy. It's like someone sprinting the first mile of a marathon. Sure, they might look incredibly fast and impressive right at the starting line, but they are inevitably going to collapse before the finish. The winner is the one who sets a pace they can actually sustain for 26.2 miles. You've got to build for the future, not just for the fires you're putting out today.
All right, moving into Section 1, the bottleneck tax.
To understand why this shift is so crucial, we first have to diagnose the underlying illness. The bottleneck tax is the inevitable exhaustion and growth plateau that occurs when you, the founder, are the sole engine of the business. I really want you to hear this loud and clear. If you are burning out, it is not a failure of your work ethic. You aren't weak, and you definitely aren't lazy. What you're experiencing is actually a technical failure in your business architecture. See, a good system takes the pressure off your willpower and puts it onto a process. When you don't have that architecture in place, you pay the bottleneck tax every single day with your own mental bandwidth. You pay it every time an employee needs you to answer a question that should just be documented. And you pay it every time a client needs your personal touch because literally no one else knows the protocol.
Let's look at what happens next in Section 2, the hustler's ceiling.
We came across a microstory from one founder in our source material who lived this exact reality. They shared, "I used to pride myself on being a hustler, but eventually I hit a ceiling where my time and energy ran out. I was the bottleneck." This is such a powerful and honestly kind of heartbreaking story because it hits the nail on the head and it's just so common. They really thought their personal effort was the only thing keeping the business alive. And it worked for a while. They muscled their way to a certain level of revenue. But eventually the math caught up with them. They're only 24 hours in a day, right? They realized that the very effort that built the business was now the exact thing keeping it from scaling. Their personal capacity became a hard, unforgiving ceiling that trapped both them and their company. So breaking through that ceiling requires a pace you can sustain for years, not weeks. It requires tireless workflows. I mean, think about it. A tired human brain forgets to send the follow-up email. A tired human brain skips a step in the QA process. But automation doesn't make mistakes. Software doesn't need a coffee break, it doesn't get overwhelmed, and it absolutely doesn't drop the ball when things get crazy busy. You need a structure that actually supports your life rather than a business that just relentlessly consumes it. You've got to ensure that the important, foundational things get done perfectly every single time, even when you're tired, distracted, or, heaven forbid, actually trying to take a well-deserved vacation.
Which brings us to Section 3, your scalable identity.
Breaking through that ceiling we just talked about requires way more than just buying a shiny new piece of software. It requires a fundamental evolution of who you are within your company. You essentially face a choice between two entirely different foundations. The first is the personal effort foundation, where you act as the engine. This is that culturally celebrated hustle we talked about earlier. It's loud, it's exhausting, and it relies 100% on you producing the power. The second choice? That's the sovereign empire foundation. This is where you step into the role of the architect.
Now, the architect's work is entirely different. It's quiet, it's structural. While the world focuses on the big, flashy launches and the loud wins, the real, lasting work is happening in the quiet efficiency of a well-built workflow. The reality is, you simply cannot build a sovereign empire on a personal effort foundation. You have to stop being the engine and start being the architect.
Because here's the harsh truth. A business without systems is really just a job with more stress. In fact, if you're operating this way, you've essentially created a situation where you are your own boss, sure, but you are the worst, most demanding, most unforgiving boss you've ever had. You never let yourself clock out, you never approve your own time off, and you constantly expect miracles on tight deadlines. If you don't build this scalable identity, if you don't transition from the engine to the architect, you haven't bought yourself freedom. You've just bought yourself a highly demanding, incredibly stressful job that is entirely dependent on your mood, your health, and your daily energy levels.
Let's fix that in Section 4, Operational Flow Protocol.
Operating without systems means you are constantly reinventing the wheel. Every single task, no matter how routine, requires a fresh decision, and that leads to massive, crippling decision fatigue. You wake up every single day fighting a battle against daily chaos just to maintain the status quo. But when you operate with systems, you unlock predictable growth. Your systems act as silent partners in your long-game strategy. They do the heavy lifting in the background, reliably and without a single complaint. Instead of daily chaos, your daily actions turn into compounding assets. Every process you built pays dividends tomorrow. This is exactly why incredibly talented, hardworking people fail. They simply run out of decision-making energy. Systems protect that finite energy so you can use it where it actually matters.
The Operational Flow Protocol is your primary architectural brick for building this new scalable identity. The pivot occurs the very day you decide to document your first process. Now, we know the psychological trap here. You're thinking, it's way faster if I just do it myself. And yes, in the short term, spending an hour documenting a 5-minute task feels like a massive waste of time. But that is the trap of the engine. Once it's documented, you realize you never have to think about that task again. You free up a small, vital piece of your mental bandwidth. Step 3. As you build and document more systems, you slowly begin to regain your life. Your business starts feeling like a reliable machine rather than a heavy burden on your shoulders. And finally, step 4, you achieve freedom flow. This isn't about doing less work, it's about doing the right, highly creative, visionary work while your foundational systems handle absolutely everything else.
Tying it all together in Section 5, Building a Sovereign Empire.
Systems are the architecture that allows your long game to become your reality. This is the core truth of the architect's mindset. This is what we mean when we talk about a sovereign empire. True freedom flow happens when your systems are actively turning those daily, mundane actions into compounding assets that literally build your future for you while you sleep. Meanwhile, you, fully stepping into your role as the architect, get to focus entirely on the vision, the strategy, and the growth. You are no longer laying the bricks, you are designing the city. The ground beneath you is solid, and you can finally see the path forward clearly, with that terrible fog of exhaustion clouding your vision.
So I have to ask you, are you building a cage or an empire? Because if you are the only thing powering your business right now, you are building a cage. The bars are made of your own obligations, your own endless to-do lists, and your own unyielding standards. And the lock on that cage? That's your own exhaustion. Every time you push harder without building a system, you just make the bars of that cage a little bit thicker. It is time to stop hustling and start structuring. It is time to step out of the cage and start laying the foundation for your empire.
Standardize the routine. Master the long game. You must standardize the routine so you can spend your precious, entirely finite energy on the creative and visionary work that actually moves the needle. You have to ruthlessly systematize the ordinary so you can focus entirely on the extraordinary. That is the path to true flow. That is exactly how you master the architecture of your business, and more importantly, how you master the architecture of your life.
It's time to stop working for your business and start building a business that works for you. If you're ready to stop being the engine, if you're ready to become the architect and create systems that actually scale your freedom rather than scaling your stress, it's time to take the logical next step. Head over to 365freedom.online to master the long game. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I highly encourage you to start laying down those architectural bricks today. Because honestly, if your business can't run without you today, where will you be 10 years from now?